All right. Hey there, everybody. I'm back on video for this check-in. I hope you all had a great 4th of July weekend, a long weekend. We just kind of hung out, didn't really do anything super different or out of the ordinary. We walked down the block and to the end of our road and we set off some fireworks before then there was a bunch of lightning and then we had to run home. And so that was kind of a scary moment, but overall it was okay. And yeah, in the meantime, I've just been working on trying to catch up on grading, always trying to meet that generally within 1 week goal of you submitting work, of me being able to read through, provide comments where necessary if you're on the wrong path, or I noticed something that could be adjusted, or if you're meeting all the goals, trying to come up with the challenge for you or some kind of suggestion. So whenever you read those comments and I give you a challenge or I kind of ask you a question, that's just to help you critically think further, reflect on the work that you're doing and try to allow that to help you move forward and grow because that's part of how we continue to learn and push and challenge ourselves, consider, different perspectives and different ways to handle writing, which in our class, we're fortunate where there are a lot of right and wrong ways of doing things, right? Like, the APA reference entry that you build, there's a right way to do that. But when it comes to, drafting a cover letter, there are some guidelines and there are some general expectations to meet. But there are other things to think about and to experiment and play with. So keep that in mind as you think about your grade, look at the rubric, and consider my comments and all that stuff. But let's look at what we've got up for this week for Module 5. Let me share my screen with you all. So as I continue to note, you want to always carve out 6 hours of time each week to focus on our course, with the understanding that you won't always need 6 hours. Sometimes less, like this week in theory, will take you less time, but other weeks it might take you longer. And of course, we're all unique and we all run into different stumbling blocks. So this is the general estimated timeline, and it will take you longer, exactly this time or a little bit less, but if you keep 6 hours, you're almost certainly going to be okay. Now, the big thing this week is the proposal rough draft and peer review. You can see that's going to take the majority of your time. So let's just jump in and look at that first of all. Now, something that I've just submitted a course issue report about to our instructional design team is that for the supportive materials, all of these links for me return this error. It's trying to go to our textbook for whatever reason, these links aren't working for additional support. However, back in the learning materials space, these do work. So when you go back here to the proposal space and information about proposals and things like that, that will be helpful for you. Language consideration, designing, and formatting. All of these are working and are functional and are giving us some samples and things to think about. So you can go back here for some of that additional support until this gets updated, because I've let our instructional design team know that, hey, for whatever reason, these links to our textbook aren't working. So they're working on that. They're going to be on it. Now, your initial post is due this Friday before midnight, and your goal is to write several hundred words, and that's where the time for this particular activity comes through. And you're taking you're taking this approach, right, to create these various sections, trying to answer these questions and move through. So the outline for you is here, and you have some sample pieces that are here to help guide you and help to answer questions. So here's our assignment sheet broken down again. And then we have these examples. And the examples, I think, are really, really great because they show you exactly how someone was able to succeed on this assignment, and earn full points. And, they're not perfect. They have things that can be improved in the way that all writing assignments have areas that could be pushed slightly differently, or different things incentivized for the reader. But they give us this really good piece, and so we have this research proposal, and they start to break this down into component sections and discussions. And then some references down here. Let's look at one other one too, together really quickly, because there was one that I really liked. It's actually this last one. Yeah, well, one, I just like the energy focus, but here we go. This you can see that we're using first person, all of that is okay. And the proposal itself is working to break down some of the early thoughts around what we found through our early research. And of course, the other activity this week has us looking at close these out. Our virtual library exercise, getting us back into the virtual library, doing a little bit of more scavenger hunt building, and just forcing you to play around with the way you can get some different search results. Because of course, you need to have some good sources here for our proposal work. And so we're going to push that forward. We're going to try our best, and we're going to try to follow um, these areas, right? This particular setup is here to guide us and to take you, hey, one section at a time. So my advice is to think about what it is you've been researching and then try to move into the writing of this just one section at a time and use the questions here to help you get some words on the page when you feel stuck. Go to those questions, try to start answering them and see what you're able to come up with and push yourself, right? It's not going to be perfect, but just get some words on the page. Get as many words down as you feel like you can as you try to approach that goal. So that way your peer has something to look at. And so you're going to submit that before you go to sleep on Friday. And then before the end of the day on Monday, you're going to try to give your peer some feedback on what's there. And we have some guidelines here to help guide you for how you're going to provide some feedback to your peer. Now, the issue with peer review, and to come off shared screen here for a bit, I just graded your resume and cover letter assignments, and not all of you received feedback from a peer. And that stinks when that happens. Whenever you submit something and you're waiting for your peer to give you some feedback, just to give you some more things to think about, and then they don't follow through with that. It's frustrating. The thing I want you to take some comfort in, though, is that we should never really completely trust a peer's review at the end of the day. It can be helpful, but we don't necessarily want to trust it. We want to trust ourselves. And the way that we develop and become more confident in ourselves and our own judgment is by completing peer review. Because we look at what someone else has done, we consider the task, we consider what they've done, how those tasks have lined up, and how it's working or it's not. And then we try to apply that same critical eye back on our own writing. And that's how we grow that confidence of knowing we're doing the right thing or we're maybe not, by looking at other examples. And that's why you're going to find so many examples in our course and in our learning materials, because that's what we can compare to. We can immediately say, this is what I'm trying to go for. How can I make it mine? So peer review, you will sometimes get fantastic feedback from a peer. That will happen sometimes. Other times you'll get no feedback. The important piece is that you do it, that you give your peer some feedback and you try your hardest, because you're developing that critical eye to put it back onto your own writing. So with that said, I will close this video down, not to keep us here for too much longer. But hey, 6 hours this week. The majority of it will be focused on building out this proposal. I'll be moving through grading your letters and other things like that as this week progresses. I'll be out of the office on Thursday, but otherwise I'll be around and be available to answer your questions as quickly as I can. I appreciate all you've done so far. We're on the back half of the semester, and we get to focus a little bit more on our personal research interest here for the proposal and things like that, and that's exciting. So I hope that will be productive and enjoyable for you as we move through it, as enjoyable as a mandatory assignment can be, right? But I hope that it is, and that you're finding some value in our work. And if you if you are, or even if you aren't, we're on the backslide and we're just moving toward the end of the term. Uh, it's we're always just focusing on trying our best to get through, earn the credential, prove our mastery of the skills that we're trying to build in this class through our submissions, asking new questions when you have them about anything that's weird in the class, something that's just not lining up, because those pop up, those happen. Like today, as I'm preparing this video, like, hey, why isn't that link working? Um, but that doesn't change the work that we do, and our best effort is to try uh, to meet the expectations that are thrown out there for us in this 200 level um, technical writing course. So with that, I'll leave you to it. I appreciate your time, your effort. Reach out to me with any questions or concerns, and I'll be in touch soon.